Hello, this is Brian Scuttle of Sonic Cinema. One of the filmmakers I was most interested to talk to at Fantasia Fest after watching his movie was Xia Magnus, the writer and director of Sanzaru, which debuts on the 29th of the festival. And here's that interview, and I hope you enjoy. Where did the inspiration for the film come from?
That's a great question. I suppose it came from a number of places. I mean, it's always hard to put your finger on exactly where something came from, because it kind of crops up inside you from like a vector of different events and kind of experiences. But I would say it probably started to swirl around in my head, started to take shape and take form as my grandparents were entering their sort of like final stages of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of our family, like particularly with my grandmother, she wanted to stay in her home. That was like her greatest wish. So we actually had to hire a lot of full-time help to make that possible. And and she was on her deathbed for years. So we my family sort of developed a relationship with this other person or these other families. We had a couple, in the film I've kind of made it into one scenario, but there was a couple different scenarios and like that in my own life. So I guess, that's kind of where maybe the seeds of it were planted, was in that time, and sort of just dealing with my own family, dealing with the kind of secrets and the trauma that bubbles up as someone's passing away, and you're sharing that with another person.
Did you talk to anybody with experiences as far as taking care of people with dementia, or people who've experienced having to go through that with their parents or grandparents? Or
Absolutely. I mean, outside of just my own personal experience of taking care of my family members, and then, watching my parents take care of their parents, very closely, and being much involved with that. Yeah, I also talked to home health aides, who specialize in this area, of elder care, and which often deals with dementia. It's often dementia is just one of many things that they're dealing with, But yes, and then also Ina Dumlau, who plays Evelyn in the film, she did a lot of her own extensive research and actually went to some facilities and talked one-on-one with a lot of people that she was able to come in contact with. That that was their profession, was home health aide. Because there's something very specific about moving in with a family, I think. Particularly towards when things, get to like the hospice phase, towards the very end of life. And it's just such an intimate relationship that you develop with the person who's sick and dying, but also with their family. So Ina also did a lot of her own kind of character work on her own.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the things that struck me about when I was watching the film was the fact that I'm sort of dealing with this right now with my mother, where it's like she's not as far she's not as far progressed as the mother in the film is, but at the same time you can definitely I definitely felt like noticed some similarities with things that I've personally experienced in dealing with her, and some of the things that have sort of cropped up when it comes to that. So yeah, it one of the things that I think I appreciate about the film so much is that it felt very authentic to the real the real situation of dealing with people in terms of Alzheimer's and dementia, and in particular, and then just that time where they're trying to you get the feeling like there's not that much time left, but at the same time they're still trying to exert a certain degree of control on their lives too.
Certainly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad that came through. That was definitely, what we were all kind of working towards. And I think when I was writing the piece, it was definitely foremost on my mind. Like I wanted, because it's not just dementia. It's sort of like the whole, that's definitely part of it, but it's kind of the whole package as someone's like life comes into the final stage and kind of for me, I actually find it quite a spiritual, even supernatural experience. Just being so close to that kind of, I don't know. It opened up. It started to open. The lines between life and death start to blur, and it definitely breaks down your assumptions about your own life, I think, and about time. And I found it quite philosophical in a lot of ways. So that is definitely what I was trying to explore there, for sure.
How was in terms of fleshing out this story? One of the things that I like is that the supernatural in the movie is there. It feels like there's not a lot of it, and I think that works to the benefit of the film. I think if you did too much of the supernatural in this film, I think it would almost just turn it into sort of another like Exorcist type movie or something like that, where it's like you just go too far into the supernatural horror. So one of the things I like is that it's so much of it is very subtle, and you build up to it, but at the same time, if you're familiar with those experiences of having loved ones go through old age to the point where it's like sometimes they're not completely sure of their surroundings, and there's a lot of things that's really getting jumbled up in their mind to where they sort of perceive reality differently. You could mark up a lot of what happens early on in the film to that, as opposed to just, oh, it's the supernatural. What was it like trying to balance the reality of the situation with bringing in a supernatural element to the film?
Totally. That's a great question. I mean, I think I don't want to say struggled, but I think I definitely, that was one of the things I worked on the most in general, because I didn't set out to write a ghost story per se, and I think that like early on, I knew I didn't want it to be just a straight up supernatural horror film. I wanted it to be about something. And so I approached it, I think, more as an exploration into those themes that I was talking about before. And the supernatural elements kind of, it wedged its way in there without me trying too hard, to add it on. Because like you said, often when you're come into contact with people who are in these states, there is a fine line between what is just kind of your psychological fragility, if you want to call it that, or your psychological state, and something that's actually like a supernatural manifestation. So yeah, I think it was definitely foremost on my mind while I was writing, and I think some early versions of the script probably, I think definitely one early version of the script, like I got a lot of feedback being like, it's not like there wasn't enough supernatural, like it wasn't confirmed enough or something like that. Yeah. So I had to like bring more in, and then maybe I overcorrected, and people were kind of like, it's too ghosty, you know what I mean? So I kind of like had to find the happy medium and find a place that I was happy with. That was, it did make you question exactly where these things were coming from. But a part of what I really wanted to do too, it was really important to me, is I didn't want it to just be an evil kind of ghost that was haunting these people. I wanted it to really be, a full kind of, have the ghosts have their own kind of personalities, and there's like the full spectrum of of everyone's own psychology kind of woven in there together. That was important to me for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of the movie is the fact that you don't really it's one of those it's a movie where the supernatural is not necessarily strictly a an evil element in the movie. It could be bringing something up that kind of needs to be brought up, and it could have motivations that would ultimately be positive as opposed to negative. And so that's one of the things that was really kind of interesting as the rest of the film unfolded, as the supernatural part becomes more and more prevalent.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for sure.
What films inspired you in making this movie?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of films, certainly. I mean, I think when I was going into it, and definitely a lot of the films from the 70s, like horror films from the 70s, were very influential on me. Like, Don't Look Now or The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby. A lot of films that I think a lot of filmmakers are looking back at those films in this time and kind of like seeing them for the complicated, sometimes problematic, but ultimately really, rich kind of pieces of art that they are, and, and culture, and kind of trying to re-examine some of the things that people in that time period were also looking at. Because I think in a lot of ways there's like some parallels between our time now and just sort of the upheaval of the 60s and 70s that kind of birthed those horror films from that time. It was also, I guess, really just a renaissance of the horror genre. So I was definitely looking at those films, certainly. But then I also, I think, European cinema and also, even Asian cinema, a lot of, was definitely a big influence on me. Kind of a quiet, slow, meditative study of something. I felt like if I was going to tell a ghost story, that it should kind of have those elements, because to me, the otherworldly, the sublime and kind of melancholy and atmosphere and dread all sort of mix up together. And to me, that's what, that's kind of what the supernatural would feel like. So I think I was definitely, like Uncle Boone Me was a big, that film was a big influence on the style, the look, and the sound design of the film. Yeah, I mean, and then also I actually drew a lot from, I mean, those are the films that really, visually and kind of thematically inspired me, but I also drew a lot from literature. Lincoln in the Bardo, the George Saunders novel, had a really big impact on me in that it's the story of these ghosts, and they all have just like the most unique personalities. And I think that was, it's about the sort of the Bardo, which is like the, Buddhist afterlife, and kind of like, it's just so much more complicated than a heaven and hell dichotomy. So I think that had a big impact on me too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today about the movie. I really appreciate it. I really appreciated the film and what you were able to accomplish with it.